It's 7:12 on a Monday morning. A suspension bridge stretches across a river as thousands of commuters drive over it without slowing down. Nobody thinks about the steel cables above them. Nobody wonders who calculated the forces holding everything together. They simply trust that someone already solved the problem years ago. That someone was probably an engineer. But here's the strange part. Most people don't become engineers because they dream about bridges. They dream about building the future. Designing rockets, creating robots, inventing the next breakthrough that changes the world. Then reality asks a different question. Can you solve problems that nobody else wants to solve? Because that's what engineering really is. Not equations, not computer software, not even technology. It's accepting responsibility for systems that millions of people may never notice, unless something goes wrong. We'll come back to that bridge. Because before an engineer is trusted with $1 billion project, something much smaller happens first. An acceptance letter arrives. Every year, hundreds of thousands of students begin engineering degrees around the world. They enter classrooms believing intelligence will be their greatest advantage. For a few weeks it seems true. Calculus, physics, programming, materials science, circuit analysis. The subjects arrive faster than most expected. Then something changes. The exams stop asking students to remember formulas. They ask them to think. A professor writes a single problem across the board. There is no obvious method, no familiar example, no shortcut. The room becomes quiet. That's the first lesson engineering teaches. Real problems rarely resemble textbook questions. But here's something even more surprising. Many of history's greatest engineering breakthroughs began with spectacular failures. In 1940, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington state twisted violently in the wind before collapsing into the river below. The disaster was captured on film and studied by engineers around the world. The bridge failed, the lessons did not. Its collapse transformed how engineers understood aerodynamic forces on long-span bridges, influencing designs for generations. Failure in engineering is often investigated more carefully than success. That idea follows students throughout their education. Assignments become design projects. Design projects become laboratory experiments. Laboratory experiments become prototypes. And prototypes almost never work perfectly the first time. Now imagine another scene. It's nearly midnight. The engineering building is still lit. Half-finished models cover the tables. Laptop screens glow across the room. Someone is debugging code for the 100th time. Another team is rebuilding a mechanism that broke during testing only hours before presentation. Nobody is asking whose idea it was. They're asking one question: how do we fix it? That's when many students discover something unexpected. Engineering is rarely an individual achievement. Behind almost every aircraft, medical scanner, smartphone, power station, or satellite is a team of specialists solving different parts of the same problem. Mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, software engineers, manufacturing engineers. Each depends on the others. But the economics of becoming an engineer introduce another challenge that classrooms rarely discuss: tuition. Years spent studying instead of earning a full-time salary. Internships that may determine future opportunities. The first job offer, the first relocation, the first major project. Every decision carries financial consequences long before an engineer receives their first professional license in fields where licensing is required. And yet, despite all those calculations, one unexpected decision can shape an entire career. We'll come back to that as well. Because before engineers begin calculating salaries, promotions, or return on investment, they encounter a reality far more important. One mistake on paper can eventually become millions of dollars in losses, or place human lives at risk. And the first time a young engineer realizes that, success stops feeling like getting the right answer. It starts feeling like earning the right to be trusted. But trust is surprisingly expensive, and one engineering disaster would eventually change how the entire profession measures the true cost of a single decision. That disaster occurred on the evening of January 28, 1986. Millions watched as the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted into a clear Florida sky. 73 seconds later, it broke apart. Investigators eventually concluded that the immediate physical cause involved the failure of O-ring seals in a solid rocket booster under unusually cold conditions. But the investigation revealed something even larger. Engineering decisions are rarely made in isolation. Schedules matter, budgets matter, deadlines matter, communication matters. The economics of engineering are not just about money. They are about the consequences of every trade-off. Long before blueprints become buildings or spacecraft, someone must decide what can be built, what should be built, and what risks are acceptable. That responsibility surprises many young engineers entering their first job. Imagine your first week. The calculations are no longer homework. The client is real. The budget is fixed. The deadline cannot simply be extended. A senior engineer slides a design across the table. Tell me what you think. At first, you search for the correct answer. Eventually, you realize there isn't one. There are only better compromises. A stronger material may double the cost. A lighter design may reduce fuel consumption but increase manufacturing complexity. An additional safety factor may improve reliability while making the product too expensive for customers. Every engineering decision lives somewhere between technical perfection and economic reality. That balancing act explains why engineering is often described as applied science rather than pure science. Scientists ask what is true. Engineers ask what works. Then they ask whether it can be built, maintained, and afforded. But this is where another misconception appears. Many students compare engineering salaries after graduation. Far fewer calculate the value of experience. During the first years, new engineers spend hours reviewing drawings, checking calculations, documenting changes, and learning from colleagues. The work may appear ordinary. Its purpose is not. Small mistakes discovered early can prevent catastrophic failures years later. That is why experienced judgment becomes one of the profession's most valuable assets. It cannot be memorized. It must be earned. Then something changes again. One successful project leads to another. Responsibilities grow. Instead of designing individual components, you begin coordinating entire systems. Instead of solving equations alone, you spend meetings explaining technical ideas to architects, managers, contractors, suppliers, or clients with different priorities. Communication becomes an engineering skill, not because it replaces mathematics, because mathematics accomplishes little if nobody understands the solution. History offers another reminder. When the Apollo 13 mission suffered an explosion in 1970, engineers and flight controllers worked together under pressure to bring the astronauts home safely. They could not eliminate every problem. They solved the most important ones first. Resourcefulness mattered as much as technical knowledge. That lesson extends far beyond space exploration. The best engineers rarely begin with perfect conditions. They begin with constraints, limited budgets, limited materials, limited time. And somehow, they still find a path forward. Which brings us back to the economics of becoming an engineer. The investment is larger than tuition alone. It includes years spent developing judgment, accepting responsibility, and learning that every decision carries both a technical cost and a human one. Eventually, another opportunity arrives. A promotion, a leadership role, perhaps the chance to approve designs instead of reviewing them. And with that opportunity comes a realization far more intimidating than any university examination. One signature can determine whether thousands of people remain safe. The numbers may fit on paper, the spreadsheets may all balance, but confidence alone has never built a structure. Because every engineer eventually discovers there is one cost impossible to measure with a calculator. That cost is trust, not the kind measured on a balance sheet. The kind earned over years and lost in a single decision. Every engineer eventually reaches a moment when nobody else in the room can make the choice for them. The calculations are complete. The simulations have finished. The drawings have been reviewed. Now someone asks a simple question. Are you willing to approve this? It sounds routine. It never feels routine. Because a signature doesn't merely approve a design. It accepts responsibility for everything that follows. Most people never meet the engineers behind the products they use every day. They don't know who designed the elevator that carries them 30 stories into the air. They don't know who calculated the beams supporting a stadium filled with 70,000 spectators. They don't know who developed the braking systems inside their cars or the software controlling aircraft navigation. And that's exactly how engineering is supposed to work. If everything functions safely, the engineer remains invisible. Recognition usually arrives only after something fails. But history also remembers the engineers whose work quietly transformed the world. When Sir John Monash helped develop new engineering methods during the First World War, he demonstrated how planning and logistics could be just as important as raw materials. When Emily Warren Roebling assumed critical responsibilities during construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, after her husband became seriously ill, she helped oversee one of the most remarkable engineering achievements of the 19th century. When teams at companies around the world developed increasingly efficient semiconductor manufacturing, they made possible the smartphones, medical equipment, satellites, and artificial intelligence systems that shape modern life. Most of those names never became household names. Their work did. That's another economic reality many people overlook. The greatest value an engineer creates is often received by millions of strangers they will never meet. A safer bridge saves commuters time every day. A more efficient engine reduces fuel consumption for years. A better medical device helps patients long after its designers have moved on to another project. The return on investment extends far beyond a paycheck. But engineering isn't immune to uncertainty. Entire industries evolve. Technologies become obsolete. Programming languages change. Manufacturing techniques improve. New environmental standards appear. Artificial intelligence automates tasks that once required weeks of manual effort. The profession demands continuous learning, because yesterday's expertise may not solve tomorrow's problems. For some people, that sounds exhausting. For engineers, it's often the reason they chose the profession in the first place. Every new challenge is another puzzle waiting to be solved. Another opportunity to improve something people use every day. Eventually, young graduates become senior engineers. Senior engineers become mentors. One afternoon, a new graduate nervously places a design on the table and asks the same question they once asked themselves. What do you think? The cycle begins again. Knowledge passes from one generation to the next, not through textbooks alone. Through conversations, design reviews, mistakes caught before construction begins, lessons shared after projects end. Which brings us back to that bridge. Thousands of vehicles continue crossing it every morning. Parents drive children to school. Ambulances reach hospitals. Businesses deliver supplies. Tourists stop to admire the view. Almost nobody wonders whether the bridge will remain standing. That confidence isn't luck. It's the product of thousands of careful decisions made long before the first vehicle ever crossed. Most people think the economics of becoming an engineer can be reduced to tuition costs, starting salaries, or lifetime earnings. Those numbers matter, but they tell only part of the story. The real investment is measured differently. Years spent learning, failures that become experience, responsibility accepted before recognition arrives, and the willingness to solve problems whose success is often invisible. Perhaps that's the true economics of becoming an engineer. You invest time before income, effort before recognition, responsibility before authority. And if you do your job well enough, millions of people may never know your name. They'll simply trust the world you've helped build. In the end, that may be the most valuable return an engineer can ever earn.